ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for having me here. I'm honored to be able to speak. I would like to bring you down to the plains of the profane plains of transport planning and transport politics after this morning session on autonomous driving. And I would like to talk a bit about how Vienna is dealing with shaping its future mobility system. It's kind of challenging because the city on the one hand is growing, and on the other hand we would like to try to reduce our car traffic. But before we start, let's jump back to the past. About 100 years ago, that's what Vienna looked like. It was a time before the car had its success story. There were tram lines, there was public transport, there was multimodal mobility. People moved on horse carriages, they cycled, they walked. And it was a time where I would say the groundstone for our very, very good public transport system was laid. I found a picture of my grandfather about 100 years ago. He was a chauffeur and one of the first car drivers in the city. And I read that in that time the car was kind of frightening. It was something new, dangerous, noisy, loud. So it's kind of funny to look back in that way. What happened then? The city went through major transitions after the two world wars. It's kind of interesting that on the one hand the city was shrinking, so the population was going down. So some kind of infrastructure was torn down, railway stations were torn down, new streets were built, and on the other hand the private car found its place in the heart of Viennese people, and it was also kind of a social democratic promise to not only have a cheap housing, but to also have a free parking space and enough parking spaces. And that went very well for a long time because the city was shrinking. But then happened what was happening in all major towns. Traffic became a major problem, and it still is. So as we know in Europe, the car is responsible for 2/3 of greenhouse gas emission in the road traffic. But we never forgot our past and our, I would say, very well-established public transport system. The city was growing again. We are now having about 1.9 million inhabitants. And what is interesting that we have, on the one hand, 700,000 cars licensed. But even more people are using our public transit. So it's about 850,000 sold annual tickets. And the success behind that is not only that it's kind of cheap, it's 365 euros per year, but we have a nice network of public transport, and even more metro lines, tram lines are being constructed. But there are another transitions coming on. COVID-19 is kind of a game changer. We can observe that more people cycle now, which is good, but we don't have sufficient infrastructure, and more people are using the car again, which is kind of a problematic development. I will come back to that later, but first, what is the success story behind the good usage of public transit? And a nice model share. Only 29% of all trips are done by car. We set ourselves rigid goals and strategies. There is an urban planning strategy. We have an urban mobility plan, an e-mobility strategy, a smart city framework strategy, and all those measures account for further reducing car traffic and bringing down CO2 emissions for the future. But these goals and strategies are one thing. The reality is another. So as we can observe in COVID-19 times, it becomes more difficult. And on top, we have city elections coming along. So what is happening in the city right now? I will bring you two examples. One example deals with the built city, the city center, the built environment, the historic places, and the other one will deal with new urban areas. When we are talking about the city center, a lot of things are going on. So Vienna is following the lead of other cities such as Paris, Stockholm, and other examples that we already heard of. We are trying to build encountering zones, bringing speeds down, make new urban recreational areas such as parks. We are dealing with green spots, it's called, and neighborhood oases where parking spaces are taken away and green spaces, recreational areas are being established. I would say that COVID accelerated that development. We also got pop-up bike lanes, because, as I said, the biking infrastructure is not sufficient. And another example, which you can see on the photo here, is very emblematic. A major crossroads, one of the most used streets in town, was closed. And a temporary public swimming pool was established with green spaces, recreational areas. And that kind of, I would say, led to a tipping point, because the boulevard media wrote very negatively about it, and it kind of led to an polarization within population concerning reshaping public space. But the fact is that we are trying to reshape and giving back more space, more public space back to the population, because now 85% of public space is dedicated to the car in form of streets or parking spaces. And not only the cities dealing with it, also some kind of citizens movement were found, such as Platz für Wien, it's called Space for Vienna, and they're trying to set new initiatives to accelerate that development. When I'm jumping to the urban development areas, I don't know what's happening with the pointer. This is the right slide. We have to choose different approaches. There is a chance to use different measures, maybe better ones, because we can plan very much beforehand. As you can see on the picture, this is an area in the south of Vienna. A lot of apartment building is going on there, and we always try to build those areas very much connected to public transport. We can see that 80% of our daily trips are starting and ending at home, and most of the travels are work travels, and even that is questionable in COVID times. So we really can think of other options than using the car. But it's a challenge, because we have some kind of old laws and regulations that are preventing that, I would say. For example, building laws that oblige real estate developers to build a certain amount of parking spaces, parking lots for new apartments. Here, for example, Berlin is way ahead. They have no minimum parking requirements, and they are trying to organize parking in new urban development areas in collective garages. So now the slide did what I want to do. I'm coming to my core topic. It's mobility management in new development areas. So we are trying to use a bundle of measures to organize mobility in new urban areas in a very innovative and new way. So there are about 10,000 of new apartments built in the city, and we really try to think of new forms of parking, reduce parking spots, put them underground into garages. If it's possible, in collective garages. We try to deal with e-charging infrastructure, because the future of our car traffic is electric, and people have to find their charging points in their own homes. And I would say bicycle parking is even as important as car parking is. So we try to really build high-quality bicycle parking in new apartments. Another aspect is sharing mobility. The shared mobility offers, such as e-cars or e-bikes or e-scooters or whatsoever, have to be near the apartments, the houses. And ideally, they are combined with new logistics and delivery services, such as parcel stations or drop-off points, and they're combined in the form of mobility points or mobility stations. When I'm talking about the infrastructure itself, the new areas are car-free. There are no cars on the upper ground. There should be nice pathways to walk, to cycle. It should be near the public transit station. And we always try to build mixed-use areas with living, shopping, working, recreation all together. And last but not least, a very important aspect is the point of awareness raising and marketing. When people move to a new place, they're kind of open to behavioral changes. So if they find another offer of mobility options, they will be open to use new forms of mobility and maybe get rid of their own car. But the tricky thing is to convince them to do that and to get them to know that. So it's not sufficient just to put those things there. You really have to hold them on their hands and show the new patterns. So if I come to my conclusion, I would say that Vienna is already on the forefront of implementing mobility solutions, but there are still a lot of things to be done. Still major efforts to be made. It's not only about giving carrots, it's also about using the stick and being more efficient when it comes to regulations and to new laws. For example, a new parking regulation is about to come, or to change the building laws, to think about new ways how to organize mobility. When it comes to new urban areas, you have to be visionary, you have to be innovative. So there is new methods being necessary, such as shown here, mobility stations, mobility points, which are operated by the Wiener Linien, which is the Viennese transport operator that shall be available for people to do the last mile travels. And within the built city center, urban transformation is going very slowly. You have to be cautious. Some temporary interventions can be good, but they also can have negative effects. So it's kind of trial and error as well. Yeah. So we are sure that the future of mobility is different than it is today. It's electric, it's active, it's digital. It's in a further future, it's for sure autonomous. But I'm sure it's not the private car that is the solution. So like my grandfather was a car enthusiast, and my grandfather and father as well. I'm a mobility enthusiast, I would say, and I'm looking forward to this future. And thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Gerald, for that view from Vienna. Thank you.
Thank you.